This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Tripartite negotiations on the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam taking shape in Addis. Tanzania legalizes HIV self-testing kits through act of parliament. And we look at how Uganda's favorite Sanko pastime game is on the decline. Hello and welcome. You're watching Africa Live. We're coming to you live from Nairobi. I'm Hannah Viviers. Here are more stories you can expect. China and Ethiopia sign MOU to formalize trade ties. And African Rangers awarded for fighting poaching and illegal wildlife trade in Ghana. We begin in the Democratic Republic of Congo, where at least 15 people have been killed in an attack by suspected Islamist militants. The raid happened on a village called Mbao that is situated in Beni in North Kivu province. It is the latest massacre to take place after the Congolese army launched an offensive against fighters from the Allied Defense Forces with the backing of the United Nations peacekeepers. Allied Defense Forces operate near DRC's border with Uganda. Well, the tripartite negotiations between Ethiopia, Egypt and Sudan on the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam is taking shape in the Ethiopian capital, Addis Ababa. The water ministers of the three countries are deliberating on technical issues of the dam. Here's CGTN's Giram Chala with more.
A strong spirit of cooperation has filled day one of the talks between delegations of Ethiopia, Egypt and Sudan on the Grand Renaissance Dam of Ethiopia. Both ministers of water of Sudan and Egypt said it is high time to work hand in hand for the benefit of the three countries.
We came here to discuss with good faith, not only for the interest of Sudan, but also the interest of Ethiopia and the interest of Egypt. We would like to see the GERD as an opportunity to strengthen the cooperation among our people with the three countries.
I believe that any differences between us can be bridged, and I am sure that we can reach an agreement that is satisfactory to our three countries. This belief is based on the reality that the Nile River is an eternal bond, kinship between our countries and people.
The current technical talks on issues such as the timetable on the filling of the Grand Dam is one of the four similar upcoming negotiations. Representatives from the U.S. government and the World Bank are also in attendance as observers. Ethiopia's Minister of Water, Irrigation and Energy, Seleshi Bekele, explained the role of the observers.
As to the role of the observers, we expect the observers to attend our trilateral technical meetings that will be held between 15 November 2019 and to 15 January 2020, and to remain independent and impartial in the process. In the course of the meetings, observers may listen to the deliberations without interference in the conduct of the meetings.
Ethiopia's Grand Renaissance Dam is close to 70% complete and will go fully operational by 2022. Guided by the 2015 Declaration of Principles, Ethiopia, Egypt and Sudan have agreed to iron out their differences on several unresolved technical issues before 15th of January 2020. The next round of talks will be held in Cairo and Khartoum, one after the other. Grumjala CGTN, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
The UN has extended a decades-long arms embargo against Somalia. Security Council members say despite recent progress recorded, more must be done to ensure terrorist groups do not turn the country into a terrorist haven. From Mogadishu, here's CGTN's Abdulaziz Billo with more.
Somalia's government has raised objections after the United Nations Security Council extended the mandate to a panel of experts for the sanctions regime in Somalia. 12 council members voted in favor of the resolution that, among other things, extends a decade-long arms embargo against the Horn of African nation. China, Russia and Equatorial Guinea abstained from voting.
We take a note with reservation on the just adopted resolution renewing the sanctions regime on Somalia. We regret that the important inputs have not been considered to reach consensus. The federal government of Somalia goes on record again in seeking the lifting of the sanctions imposed on Somalia since 1992.
Mogadishu argues that the report presented to the Security Council doesn't reflect the reality on the ground. Through its permanent representative to the UN, it warns that misleading reports undermine government's efforts of creating a strong security force capable of ending extremist attacks in the Horn of African nation.
The panel of experts continue to report false accusations, claims and gossip undermining our reform efforts and our fight against the terrorist group Al-Shabaab. The federal government of Somalia will not tolerate the naming of Somali individuals and business enterprises being named in the past, current or the future panel of experts reports without reasonable standard of proof. In that regard, to pave the way for future collaboration, we call for the establishment of the reliable mechanism to redress.
A partial lifting of arms import to Somalia was also extended by 12 more months. In 2013, the UN Security Council announced a partial lifting to allow the East African nation to purchase light weapons. Experts say recent Al-Shabaab threats in the country and beyond require strengthening the country's security forces. In recent months, an elite unit of the National Army has increased operations in the Lower Shabelle region, pushing out the insurgent group from its main operation bases.
At least the last 3 years, the figures show that they have been emboldened and more assertive, and the numbers says a lot in terms of the casualty that they have inflicted, both the civilians and the targets, which is mainly the AMISOM and the Somali security forces.
Mogadishu argues that if the arms embargo is likely to remain in place, eradicating Al-Shabaab will likely be a big challenge. It now wants international support in securing its borders to curb the flow of illegal weapons, foreign fighters and other vital resources from falling into the wrong hands. Abdulaziz Bilon, CGTN, Mogadishu, Somalia.
Over to Tanzania, where the government has legalized self-HIV testing. The bill was passed by Parliament and would allow citizens to buy HIV test kits at pharmacies without a doctor's prescription. CGTN's Daniel Kijo has that story.
Tanzania says it's taking the war against HIV to the next level. It has now made it legal for anyone over the age of 15 to test themselves for the virus. Medical experts say the move will help the country to meet the 90-90-90 goals, which focus on ending the AIDS pandemic by 2020.
This will increase the penetration in the number of people who avail themselves for testing for the HIV virus.
Tanzania's health ministry reports show that new infections on teens aged 15 to 19 are high, with 65,000 new infections yearly, 80% being girls. Tanzania has 1.4 million people living with HIV, but only 62% of the population know their status. Now the government hopes that with this new testing method, that number could increase up to 90%. Before the bill, testing was only done in labs, using rapid tests and enzyme-linked immunoabsorbent assay. The new tests have not been made available yet, but doctors say users have to take into account that the virus also has an incubation period. So even with a self-test, it's important to test again after 3 months.
With certain tests, you might have contacted the disease 5 days ago, and the fact that your result is negative does not necessarily mean that you are HIV negative.
The government says the self-testing should be voluntary. It will also require the person assisting one to undertake HIV self-testing to maintain confidentiality. Views on the issue are mixed.
This is a good thing. It will help us know our status.
There are some who would like this method, but some won't. It's scary. Some might not be mentally ready.
Young people currently account for 40% of new infections. It's hoped that the nation can use this testing method to save the lives of its youth, who account for 60% of its population. Daniel Kijo, CGTN, Dar es Salaam.
Ethiopia and China have signed 2 different memoranda of understanding that could formalize and deepen cooperation on custom duties and agriculture. The representatives from the 2 countries say the new MOU will have paramount importance in expediting bilateral trade growth and cooperation.
Ministers of China and Ethiopia hailed the contribution that their custom commissions have made to promote bilateral trade facilitation and safeguard trade security. During the recent signing of the customs agreement, the ministers committed to a shared market development agenda.
The MOU will strengthen our cooperation in relation to questions like tax procedure, risk management, anti-smuggling, law enforcement, and extra. In this way, we can also enhance our cooperation with multilateral framework. The signing of MOU will bring our cooperation to a new height.
Ethiopia's minister said though the trade relation between Ethiopia and China is growing, there is room for expansion.
Once this memorandum of understanding is signed, a detailed action plan that aim to facilitate the implementation of the memorandum of understanding will be conducted. Based on this action plan, the 2 institutions will join their efforts and work in close cooperation in order to achieve the objective of Memorandum of Understanding.
This second MOU is expected to step up bilateral cooperation on plant and animal quarantine and promote export of agricultural products from Ethiopia to China.
We wanted to work on specifically on mango beans and the quarantine center capacity building, because they need big volume of exports of both livestock and the crop, but our quality checking mechanism is not to the level that we need. That's why this time we have this bilateral agreement together with memorandum of understanding. I hope if we will work intensively on this, we will, maybe the market capacity is very big, and that will be the new niche for Ethiopia.
The leaders agreed that understanding the value of the deal will result in its rapid adoption in the 2 countries.
There is a very big market in China, and Ethiopia paid a lot of attention on it. The gate into China will open up, and we welcome Ethiopia and the rest of the world to sell high quality and especially agricultural products to China.
This agreement celebrated the growing strong ties between the 2 nations with a vision to expand. Ethiopia has benefited from Chinese expertise and finance in the energy, agriculture modernization, road construction, as well as airports and rail infrastructure expansion sectors. Beryl Oro, CGTN.
In Paris, Yellow Vest protesters swarmed the streets of the capital. It comes a year after their first demonstrations, which were sparked by rising fuel prices and the high cost of living. Police on Saturday fired tear gas and used water cannons to disperse the crowds. Organizers wanted to show President Emmanuel Macron that they haven't gone away. Our correspondent Natalie Powell has more.
José Espinosa has been a gilet jaune, or a yellow vest protester, since the movement began. He set up an arm of the group in the Paris suburb of Montreuil and organised the area's first demonstration.
50 people came. We didn't know each other, but we all had the same feeling that something big was about to happen.
That took place exactly a year ago. On that day, over 280,000 people across France took to the streets in protest against high taxes and low salaries, incensed by a government plan to increase fuel tax. Demonstrations continued every Saturday for several months. Some protesters occupied roundabouts, others vandalised shops and restaurants, and most wore high-vis yellow vests, which every French motorist is legally obliged to carry and which gave their name to the movement. In recent months, though, protests have died down, which some have blamed on poor organisation and unclear demands. But José disagrees.
We're demanding 4 things. One, to increase people's spending power because people need to have better salaries and revenues. Two, to fight against climate change and fight for environmental causes. Three, to get a true fiscal policy that strikes the richest so that the poor can benefit from it. And four, to have new democratic rights.
As a result of the Yellow Vest protests, the French government did back down over the fuel tax hike. It also handed out billions of dollars worth of tax cuts. But the demonstrations themselves have been a clear sign of public dissatisfaction in the current government and French President Emmanuel Macron.
I think the protesters put the government in an uncomfortable position. Macron was especially confronted by the demonstrators, symbolically speaking, because it was his name called out during protests. People wanted him to resign. We don't know what will come next from this movement, what the consequences will be, but everyone knows this will leave marks in history.
For Jose, he is convinced this particular chapter in French history will continue, especially as more and more people are becoming politically engaged through it. Natalie Powell, CGTN, Paris.
Time for us to take a short break and return. Here's what you can expect. African Rangers awarded for fighting poaching and illegal wildlife trade in Ghana. And we look at how Uganda's favorite Sanko pastime game is on the decline.
Each day, there are millions of stories. Each one can open new perspectives, new possibilities. Wherever you look, we are there to see, discover, explore. We put the pieces together to find what really matters to you, all around the world, all around the clock. Our reporters are at home across the globe. From our headquarters in Beijing and production centers in Washington, Nairobi, and London, China Global Television Network. Stories from across the globe, reaching people across the globe. CGTN. See the difference.
Welcome back. You're watching Africa Live. The second African Ranger Awards ceremony was held in Accra, Ghana. 10 out of 115 rangers on the continent were rewarded for their dedication and commitment to fight poaching and illegal wildlife trade. The awards are sponsored by the Alibaba Foundation in collaboration with the Paradise International Foundation. CGTN's Penina Karibe was there, and she brings us the following report.
It was a ceremony to honor selflessness and celebrate the great efforts being made on a daily basis to protect Africa's wildlife. This was the second session of the African Ranger Awards, a ceremony set up to recognize and support the achievements and efforts of African rangers to combat poaching, habitat loss, and illegal wildlife trade. The African Rangers Awards were established back in July 2017 by the founder of Alibaba Group and board member of the Paradise International Foundation, Jack Ma.
For a picture, please.
The award seeks to identify 500 dedicated rangers over the course of 10 years and will provide grants totaling $1.5 million. For the rangers, the job is a daily sacrifice, a choice between life and death. A survey in 2016 showed that in Africa, 82% of the rangers have faced mortal danger on the job, and over 60% of the rangers were attacked directly by poachers.
So this year, we just launched Africa Ranger Family Supporter Plan to support your families. We hope that all the heroes, you're bleeding, but we don't want your family also crying because of the poverty and no jobs.
That will go a long way in supporting the families of Africa's rangers, some of whom spent many of their years away from their loved ones. Africa is the world's richest continent in terms of wildlife, yet this treasure is getting depleted every year. At present, the population of the African elephant is declining at a rate of 30,000 per year. Gorillas and rhinos too are on the verge of extinction, and forums such as this one are providing an opportunity to preserve this precious heritage.
China has a population of 1.4 billion and is the world's second largest economy. If China and the Chinese people want to do something, if China and the Chinese people devote to some causes, that one will surely achieve success.
It may be a long while before this war is won, but these are necessary efforts towards that victory. Penina Karibe, CGTN, in Accra, Ghana.
In Uganda, one childhood game continues to be a favorite pastime. Sanko is an old game that can be played anywhere, but interest in this traditional game and others like it is dwindling, as Leon Sayanga reports.
Teopista Naliange enjoys her playtime. With her friends, they hop about in this small area. They are playing a game called Sanko. It requires very few things to start with: a flat ground and a flat stone.
We toss the stone into a box and hop through the empty spaces. After that, I can claim another box. That becomes my house and nobody can take it.
Sanko is popular among young females, though boys also sometimes participate.
It takes much of our thoughts away. We even forget to do the house chores. You just want to play.
Many children have grown up playing games like Sanko. Such helped build friendships, and often even with the weather, there was no stopping. Sanko is just one of the many indigenous games played around here.
There is bladder, kwepena and kakere. They are interesting.
Unfortunately, a lot of these games are dying out. More young people are being drawn to electronic games instead. It is causing some concern that children are being less active and interacting less.
I think we should bring back these games. They kept us together. We would know each other. Today every child is on their own, locked up in the gates.
There is some effort to give new life to some of these old games. Kwepena or dodgeball has taken on a modern form. But it may still take small communities like this one to keep traditional games like Sanko alive. Leon Sanyanga, CGTN, Lubugumu, Central Uganda.
Well, that brought back some childhood memories. Let's take a short break and return. Your sports news. Let's take a look at the headlines. Thousands take part in the 5th edition of Cote d'Ivoire International Marathon in Abidjan.
Images may appear to be identical, but looks can be deceiving. The difference is not always obvious. It has to be discovered. There are always different sides to a story. We put the focus on the details. To see more, to understand better. CGTN. See the difference.
You're watching Africa Live. Welcome back. Your sports news. The capital, Abidjan, may not be the first place that comes to mind as a home of long-distance running, but the 5th edition of the Cote d'Ivoire International Marathon attracted thousands of runners on Friday. Athletes from across Africa and beyond took part. Organizers have now set sights on making the annual marathon a major fixture in the running calendar. Makia Mutua has more.
Despite the rising temperature levels, nearly 20,000 amateur and professional runners took part in this year's edition of the annual marathon, divided between the 10, 21 and full 42-kilometer disciplines, stretching between the communes of Plateau and Trècheville. In the women's race, Benin runner Bertil Jarikou crossed the finish line in 3 hours 5 minutes to win, while Cameroon's Justilin Fouimi re-established his dominance in the men's category, marking a 3rd consecutive win in the Ivorian capital with a time of 2 hours 22 minutes. Raja Lagbe of Ghana finished 2nd, crossing the finish line with a time of 2 hours 36 minutes.
I wanted to run 3 times and win 3 times.
and I believe I've achieved my goal. And it's something that's not easy. Unfortunately, I could not manage the 2 hours and 15 minutes that I had targeted because it was very hot. Next year, though, I think I'll be up to the challenge.
Well, it's unfortunate I couldn't win, but I still fell into the medal zone. That is a great congratulations to me as well. And next year, I'm definitely sure that they are going to organize the same race, which will be coming on the next year as well. We just pray to God that God should give us the strength, and then coming next year, we can come and compete and win as well again.
This year's edition of the race saw the introduction of new marathon bibs with smart timing chips for the first time. The race day coincided with Cote d'Ivoire's National Peace Day, a holiday to mark national and political peace in the West African nation.
This is a holiday that allows us to advocate for peace and cohesion in Cote d'Ivoire through the marathon. Our wish in a few years is to have attractive prizes of up to $50 million to bring in great runners from all over the world, including Kenya and the US.
The marathon cannot take place in a country that is in trouble. That's why I wanted to encourage Ivorian athletes to practice sports because it promotes good health.
With organizers targeting further growth of the event in future, the success of the 5th edition is a positive stepping stone for the Cote d'Ivoire International Marathon towards becoming a major marathon destination. Mahia Mutua, CGTN.
Turning to qualification for the 2021 Africa Cup of Nations, where Kenya's Harambee Stars arrived back in Nairobi on Saturday after holding Egypt's Pharaohs to a 1-0 draw in their group opener. The team now shifts its attention to their next fixture in Group G, where they face Togo at home on Monday. Head coach Francis Kimanzi's side claimed an unlikely draw against the 2019 tournament hosts to earn a valuable point on the road. The East African side later trained on Saturday evening in preparation for the tie against the 2006 World Cup finalists, who were stunned 1-0 by the Comores in their opener. Kenya captain Victor Wanyama says the team is learning from their mistakes and eager to take on bottom of the group, Togo.
You know, football is a game of mistakes. We do mistakes, then we learn from it, and then we move on. Come to Togo game, we have to take the positives and try and apply in the game and keep pressure on them and try and win the game as well.
Well, that's it for this edition of Africa Live. Remember, you can send your feedback to the contacts on the screen and follow us on digital media platforms. For me, Hannah Viviers, and the rest of the Africa Live team, thank you so much for watching. We'll see you next time.
This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
They say a good teacher